In June 1954, the democratically elected president of Guatemala was removed from power. The operation cost the CIA approximately $2.7 million. United Fruit Company had been lobbying for it for 3 years. In 1899, two American entrepreneurs named Minor Keith and Andrew Preston merged their competing fruit operations into a single entity registered in New Jersey. The stated purpose was efficiency. The actual result was the most powerful private government the Western Hemisphere had ever seen. Within a decade, United Fruit Company controlled more telegraph lines in Central America than most of the sovereign states it operated inside. The company's pitch to host nations was straightforward and, on its surface, reasonable. We build the infrastructure. We employ the labor. We connect your ports to global markets. Honduras had fewer than 100 miles of paved road in 1910. United Fruit built railroads. They were not, however, building them for Honduras. Every rail line terminated at a United Fruit dock. Cargo that did not belong to the company paid rates the company set. By 1930, United Fruit owned over 1,400 miles of railroad across Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, and Cuba. No government in the region owned more. What distinguished United Fruit from other colonial-era enterprises was the specificity of its legal arrangements. The company did not simply operate under local law, it negotiated the law itself. In Guatemala in 1901, company lawyers drafted the terms of their own operating concession, including a 99-year exemption from import duties and a tax rate that would remain fixed regardless of future legislative changes. The Guatemalan Congress ratified the document. They ratified language written in Boston. This was not unusual for United Fruit. It was the model. The crack appeared quietly, embedded in the accounting. United Fruit reported the value of its Guatemalan land holdings to the government for property tax purposes at roughly $1 million. The same land was carried on internal company documents at roughly $19 million. The discrepancy was not a rounding error. It was policy. When a land reform program under President Jacobo Arbenz in 1952 offered to compensate the company for uncultivated land at its declared tax value, United Fruit suddenly revised its estimate upward by more than 16 times. The government held the receipts. The company called its own filing fraudulent in order to avoid the consequences of it. That argument would travel from Boston to Washington, and in Washington, it found a very receptive audience. By 1930, United Fruit Company controlled 3.5 million acres across Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, and Cuba. Not leased, owned. The company's internal land surveys, preserved in the Harvard Business School Baker Library archives, show that UFC held more titled territory than the governments of several of those nations combined. They called the arrangement a concession. What it actually was a parallel state with a better balance sheet. The mechanism was vertical and total. UFC owned the only refrigerated shipping fleet in the Caribbean, the Great White Fleet, 95 vessels by 1950. It owned the international railways of Central America, which meant any competitor needing to move product to port paid UFC for the privilege. It owned the telegraph lines. In Guatemala City, UFC's local subsidiary, the Tropical Radio Telegraph Company, processed more diplomatic cable traffic than the Guatemalan government itself. The State Department knew this. A 1950 internal assessment by the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala City, now declassified and held at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, noted that UFC's infrastructure position gave it, quote, effective veto power over the movement of goods and communications in the Republic. That memo did not trigger a congressional hearing. It was filed. The human cost was denominated in specific numbers that nobody in Washington chose to read aloud. Guatemalan banana workers on UFC plantations earned between 50 cents and $1.50 per day in 1950, while UFC's net profit that year exceeded $65 million. The company paid zero income tax to Guatemala under a 99-year concession agreement signed in 1901. When President Jacobo Arbenz passed Decree 900 in June 1952, expropriating 400,000 acres of UFC's uncultivated land and offering compensation based on the company's own declared tax value of $185 million, UFC's lawyers immediately revalued the same land at $15.9 million and delivered the revised number directly to Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. Dulles was not a disinterested party. His former law firm, Sullivan & Cromwell, had drafted UFC's Guatemalan operating agreements. His brother Alan Dulles, director of the CIA, owned UFC stock. Both facts were documented, publicly known, and ignored by every major American newspaper except The Nation, which ran the conflict of interest story in April 1954 to an audience that could not yet force consequences. The point of no return arrived on June 18, 1954, at approximately 8 p.m. local time, when CIA-trained mercenary forces crossed the Honduran border into Guatemala under Operation PBSUCCESS. The operation had been authorized by President Eisenhower on August 12, 1953, in a meeting documented in a now declassified NSC directive. The budget was $2.7 million. The entire operation was coordinated from the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala City, with UFC's own communications infrastructure used to transmit field updates. Ambassador John Purifoy cabled Washington at 11:47 p.m. on June 27th, confirming Arbenz had resigned. UFC's stock rose 1.4 points the following morning on the New York Stock Exchange. The banana company had not just survived a Democratic government's attempt to tax it, it had ended that government entirely, using the diplomatic and military apparatus of the most powerful nation on earth as a corporate collections department. What the episode documented in full is not simply the story of one company's excess. It is the first fully operational blueprint for corporate sovereignty, the proof of concept that a sufficiently large private entity could write the laws, own the infrastructure, co-opt the regulators, and outsource coercion to a superpower when the laws it wrote were challenged. Every multinational that has since negotiated a bilateral investment treaty with investor-state dispute clauses, every corporation that has sued a sovereign government for changing its own tax code, every entity that has used trade architecture to constrain democratic outcomes, inherited that blueprint from 3.5 million acres of Central American banana land, and the men in Washington who decided the price of fruit mattered more than the sovereignty of the people who grew it. The reckoning, when it finally came, arrived small and late. In 1958, the United States Department of Justice filed an antitrust suit against United Fruit Company. Not for the coups, not for the private armies, not for the tax exemptions written by the governments it owned, for monopolizing the banana trade. United Fruit consented to a decree in 1958 requiring it to divest assets and create a competitor. That competitor became Chiquita. The men who coordinated the 1954 overthrow of Jacobo Arbenz, CIA Director Alan Dulles, Secretary of State John Foster Dulles, both personally connected to United Fruit through legal and financial ties documented in congressional records, faced no criminal inquiry. They were celebrated. Alan Dulles received the National Security Medal. John Foster Dulles had an airport named after him. Arbenz fled Guatemala. The coup government reversed his land reform. The United Fruit land went back. What followed was 4 decades of military rule and civil war in Guatemala, a conflict that claimed an estimated 200,000 lives, a figure documented by the United Nations-backed Historical Clarification Commission in 1999. That commission found the Guatemalan state committed acts of genocide. United Fruit Company was never named in any legal proceeding connected to those deaths. It had already rebranded. By 1984, United Fruit had become United Brands, then Chiquita Brands International. In 2001, Chiquita paid a $25 million fine, not for Guatemala, but for payments made to a Colombian paramilitary organization designated a terrorist group. The company admitted the payments. Executives received probation. The corporation survived. The template United Fruit built. Infrastructure ownership as leverage. Cultivated diplomatic access as a tool. Tax code authorship as a quiet form of sovereignty. Did not die with the company's name. It was studied, refined, and exported. Today, the mechanisms are cleaner, the language is different, and the paper trail is longer. But in the extractive zones of the 21st century, the architecture of what United Fruit designed is still load-bearing. The word they invented for what it built, Banana Republic, entered the dictionary as a punchline. The countries it described are still paying the debt. What they built outlasted every investigation. What do you think that tells us about who the law was actually designed to protect? Drop your answer below. And if you want to keep pulling at threads like this one, subscribe. Because every week we expose another system they hoped you would never understand.